So in our last lecture, we're just defining some of the terms that we can see there for our PHP. But PHP is nothing without actually understanding why we are doing what we are doing and how we might want to get to a specific page. So there's certain things that would also then need to have so that we've got a web system. It's very difficult to explain each process or each element without actually having the elements clearly defined. And by clearly defined is why are we doing some of these things. We did touch on some of the basics, but there's still more that we can actually work with and do so that we learn a bit more about our PHP. Because like we said in our work, it is just scripting. So scripting does not give us anything that we can work with or we can get to understand without actually doing it. So we need more time to actually design certain aspects and certain attributes of our page. So for example, depending on whatever it is that we are doing, we then now need to come up with a design to see what each element does for us. And each of the elements would then have attributes that we can add. So let's say we are here and we want to add more content. Okay, so let's say I put a new text file and then I save this file as my HTML content. So let's just say I save it as HTML TUT for tutorial, and then this I then need to select a PHP so that it's a PHP file. Okay, and then I have my HTML tutorial. At the same time, I can come back to this particular page, and before the body I can actually put a link that should take me to the other page. So we can do it this way, and the reason we are doing it this way is we want to be able to compare and use certain things. So this is HTML TUT.php, and we'll then also say HTML there for the tag for the text. So if I save that, make sure it's just after the body and you put your content there. At the same time, we need to save that particular page and be able to view it. Okay, so we'll start with a blank page because we want to learn the code bit by bit, and as we proceed we'll be able to do more than we have done already. So if we go to our existing page and we refresh, we'll now have HTML at the top. So what this then means now is this will then become our PHP learning. The next will be our HTML learning. If we've got more pages that we want to actually work with, we can actually be able to design them as we go. And what I would have actually wanted us to learn are different perspectives of our learning curve. We'll also then get into design, we'll also get into a bit of some database, among other things. There's so much more that we can learn, but for the purposes of our learning, we just need to put specific blocks that we can then be able to use as we proceed with our learning. Okay, so the next thing we also want to put is, let's just copy that, Control copy, and then Control paste, Control want to also learn CSS. We also want to learn JavaScript. So this will be CSS. This would be JavaScript. Okay, so this will also need supporting pages. We'll learn why we are putting these supporting pages in a bit. So let's just create the pages. Control copy. We've got a new file. We save that as CSS. We also create a new file. And then we come back here, we put our JavaScript tutorial. We copy that and we save this page as well as our PHP file. So from there, we are then saying the moment we have this, we can now be able to link to each of the pages. And this A simply is our anchor tag that we can actually use to then take us to whichever page we want. If I come back to my page, we'll then actually see we've got HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So if I select HTML, it just takes us to the page, but there's nothing on it so far. I select that one, takes us to that page, but there's also nothing on it. Takes us to that page, there's also nothing on it. So now we want to actually start building each element by element, and we are then explaining what each element does. So as you can see, everything is now on our page, but nothing has been done yet. So this, what we have there, is how we'll then define some of the concepts within our page. So each page will need to have specific attributes. So if we come to our HTML tutorial, that's where we'll then start. The first tag we need to have is HTML. And then HTML gives us the boundary of how each page is supposed to work. So we've got the boundary, which is HTML, and this then starts running our page. But as you can also see, if I just run my page, which is HTML, it gives me the location of where this file is. So we would actually need to then make sure we change that. So by default, if there's nothing on it, it should just give us the location of where this file is actually located. So we can go back and we come back to our code. We then put the next tag, which is the head tag. The head tag contains the heading of our page, and we would also need to add more content to then change that location. So we can put a title, and then with our title, we then want to give it a name. So we want to call this HTML tutorial. Okay, the moment we save, we can come back to our page and we select HTML, and now instead of giving us this in our title, we now have HTML tutorial, and that's what we're hoping for. At the same time, we can also add what are known to be meta tags. Okay. where we'll just put HTML tutorial like that. So what this then simply means is, on our website, or when we are running our website, this is what your search engine will actually pick up. And at any given point in time, we're then giving a script that will then be able to pick your website from a million other websites. So meta tags become very important because they give you a guideline as to what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to do it, and the content and the context of what it is that we are doing. So it then makes life easier, it then makes life better, and we'll be able to do slightly more than we've had, or than we have within our website, or list of websites that are available on the planet. So it's very important that you have meta tags, because they assist in everything that we need to do in our web design. So the next set of tags are your body tags, where the body tags pretty much give you the place where we'll be able to put whatever it is that we want to display. So for a start, we can simply say this becomes our H1, and then we say tutorial in HTML, like that. So you can click on save. We've actually used H1 before. If we refresh, we now have a tutorial in HTML. So these are some of the main issues or main aspects that we can work with. So now we want to actually get into designing our page using just simply code. In some instances, we can use other platforms to create our page, but now we want to learn how to use these tags to create a system or a range of systems that we can be able to use for our learning. So let's actually get into that and see how each element can be used and will be used in our learning. So in line 8, I've just put another tag, which is a HR tag, which simply stands for horizontal rule, and it puts a line on our page like that. So in other words, we now have content and context to what we want to do. HTML becomes different from PHP in that it's not scripted. It's just tags that we use for different things. And each element that we use can be just simply that, an element. And we've got different aspects that we can then be able to use so that we see what each element is supposed to do. So let's actually work like we were doing with our PHP, and then we create our table, and within our table we explain elements by element. So we would also need to add some more content so that we can be able to see how some of the things will be working. So we need to go back to our folder, which is the folder that we created, which is date 25, and we have it in htdocs and date 25. So far this is what we've got in our folder. We want to now be able to add content that we'll be able to use. So we'll create folders for different things. The first thing we want to do is we want to have a folder that contains our images. we want to have a folder that also contains our JavaScript. We want to have a folder that contains our CSS. What this then means is, with these elements or with these aspects, we'll be using each one of them to do our learning. Okay, so we can then proceed from there. So as we proceed, let's get our content in order. We want to put a few items, and we name each of the items as we get along. Right. The first thing that we'll do would be as follows, whereby we put a table. We really want to get some of the basics, and as we build, we'll be building something that we can use for purposes of our learning. So we would want to have a table row. We would also want to have our table column. So for example, I made a mistake there. For example, let's say we put tag name, or let's say we also put td. Let's say we then put tag. This does not actually have a use. Maybe we can put a description. For each of our tags, so that at least we can just be listing them and getting to know what each element does and have a brief description of it. So let's say we can just start by putting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yes, we have 9 so far. So let's actually put 9 lines from this one, and then we'll just edit them to suit whatever it is that we want to do. I think that's it. So the tag name will be HTML. This would be our head. This would be our title. This will be our table. This will be our meta. This will be our H1. Or this would be our TR. This will be our TD, like that. So brief description would be as follows. The page tag that can be used to link our content. Okay. The head tag contains all imports that are to be used in the page. This title contains the name of the page. table contains the table that we want to use. At the same time, we've got a meta, which gives us page details and a key word reference. So our keyword reference pretty much means if we are searching for something, that is what can be picked up by the search engine. This, on the other hand, which is our H1, gives us a heading. At the same time, this gives us the entire table row. This gives us the table column. So these are some of the things that we want to actually work with. At the same time, we'll be adding. Let's just save that. We go back to our page and we see what we have actually put. So we've got our HTML, which gives us our content or the entire page, our head, our title, our table, our meta, our H1, our table row, and our column. So this pretty much gives us the basics, or some of the basics that we would want to actually have. But as we proceed, we also want to put more tags. So the tags are way too many for us to actually learn all at once, but we can add a few more tags so that we see how they work. And we'll then get into a little bit of the page design, whereby we want to design our page so that the page can look and feel more like a website. And with the websites that you then see online, you'd actually then find they're not as plain as what we've got there, but we can now actually be able to use them as reference points. So the next thing we also want to learn now is we are saying we can also add content to this particular page. Okay, for example, we can do the following. I'm sure I can still paste what I had. We can actually have a link, right? A link gives access to a file not on the HTML page, but can be stored somewhere. Okay, so we'd want to actually then show an example of a link right now so that we know what our link does. So we come there and we put our link tag, whereby our link will then have the following. It will have an href, which simply stands for hyperlink reference. It will then have a type, it will then have a rel, which I should think pretty much means a value that would be wanting to denote, because with our link it doesn't only give us just our CSS. So it will actually then say to us, let's have a reference, let's have the type of reference, let's have the type of file that we are actually wanting to work with. So it then can be something that we use whilst we get to our learning of our HTML tags and how each element can also be used. At the same time, we can have our image. Which is simply img, and the description for that is this gives us a image that we can use for our document. Okay, so I think for some of the terms we've sort of done some of the most common tags, and we can work with those tags to get to our learning. Okay, let's just go online for a bit and we can see some of the content that we can view from a website that is online. So I usually use DuckDuckGo. Let's test some of these things out. So for example, we're saying with our meta tag, our meta tag pretty much gives us a description or a value based on what we are trying to get, or the values that we are trying to get, and this then becomes something that we can use. Okay, the internet doesn't seem to be responding.
Through my wife and children.
So I've just downloaded this website, and it won't be the same as actually being on a website, but for what we want to learn now, I can just be explaining what each element will most probably be and the number of tags that we can work with. So for example, we can put images like this. We can also put a menu like that, where each of these elements can actually be clicked. We can choose a language, we can choose a login, a search, we can have that image right there. We can have these elements. We've got our links. Most of what we see here we can actually be able to create on our own and use whilst we are working with whatever it is that we are doing. So let's just say we come back to our tutorial, and now from this tutorial we want to actually then create a new page, and this page we then want to infuse some of these tags with other information that we can work with that help us to create and build a web page. So we can come here, we create a new text file, we then save it as follows. We want this to be our home, and home simply stands for home page. We click on save, and then whilst we have saved it, we can then be able to put our content or our context as we please. So we start with our HTML tag. We then go to our head tag. Although there's one other thing that you need to note, each tag that we've had and described will need a closing tag unless otherwise because there are some tags that don't need a closing tag, and these tags pretty much we will discuss them as we go. For example, if you noticed, we used the BR tag, which did not have a closing tag. We used the HR tag, which also did not have a closing tag. So some tags don't have closing tags, and we can build from there. So in your last assignment, we were asking you to actually create a web page. Okay, so we'll try and work with that page, change it a little bit. We'll change it in the sense that we'd want certain things to flow in a specific way. So to begin with, we can put a tag which is called the navigation tag, and the navigation tag starts from there, and with this navigation tag we can then put the content that we want to put. So for example, we would want a menu. We've got a new tag called an unordered list, which is a UL tag, where with this tag we can be able to put our lists like that, and then this becomes home. I'll copy that, paste it there. This becomes about. I copy that, I paste it there. This becomes products. The next one becomes services. Okay, like that. So before we proceed, maybe I can explain these new tags that we've done. We can have a navigation, which is NAV, which is what we have in line 6 there, whereby we are simply saying with our navigation we want to be able to put a place where we can have a menu, and with that menu we can then put content for each menu item and each menu element. So this then is also having an unordered list, which is our UL tag, which simply means we can have a list of elements that we'll then be putting within our page so that we can view specific items or specific elements within our page. So this then becomes our starting point. And then the LI tag then gives us the list of values that we want to work with. And the list of values that we have will then be what take us to different pages and different aspects of our page. And then this would be a consulting. For lack of a better description, whereby we are then saying this is what we've got, and that then becomes the title of our web page. So if we come back to our browser, we can then say localhost, we then put D25, we then put home. I think we need to put the extension as well for it to work. And then from there, we then actually get to see that this is a consulting firm, and we've got home, about, services, and products. Okay, so this is us now viewing or seeing what each element does for us. Okay, so with the elements that we've got, we can then be able to actually put them individually as we are building our web page. So this is how our tags will be working, and this is how we can use our tags to deliver whatever it is that we are hoping to deliver on our page. The next element we need to add to our learning is as follows. We need to add a few attributes that we can work with, and with these attributes they work as follows. The first attribute is input. So for example, we can have an input, and an input simply comes as an input, and our input would then need to have a type, which can then be text. This displays a box where a user can enter information. We've got another type of object we can work with, which is a button. And a button can contain some text, which is press me, where this gives us a button to click on. So if I save that and come back to my page, I'll actually then get to realize that I've got, this is my text box and this is my button. However, this is all in the same line. I might need to put our line break that we said is BR, so that we can see the different lines that are there. So if I refresh, I'll then actually get to view that this is what my lines look like. At the same time, I can also put another line break there. I can put another tag called an image. So it's img, and then we can put src for our source, and then we now need to specify where this image is. So we need an exact location of where our image is. So whilst we're there, let's actually go into our folder for our website. So our folder for our website is htdocs day 25 images. So we want to be able to actually reference any of these images here and get to that precise location. So to do that, we need to then put a path. As you can see at this particular instance, I can actually see that I've got images, and this is maybe an image that I would want. Okay, so under images, it's under images, then it's 1m.png, and then it will actually show me what that image is just by going to the Explorer and actually accessing this. So I need to put images 1m.png to be able to access that particular image. So it's images 1m.png, and then I have my image in my document. If I refresh, I can then now see my image is on the page. So I'll just maybe go through this once more. We're simply saying we put a tag called img, and then we put a source, and then the source, we get how to put the source by just selecting images and 1m.png, which is what I then put at this particular section, so that I can actually be able to add that particular image. And with our images, they then help us to build and design our system as we progress. Another example we can work with is another tag, and we call this tag a text area, whereby our text area pretty much gives us a room to actually put more than one line of input, whereby we can put our rows and our columns. So we can say we want 5 rows, we can say we want 6 columns, like that. Click on save, and if we refresh, we actually then can see what our text area looks like. So this will then have some content that we can work with. So as it stands, we need to at least work with something that we can be able to give light on and be able to develop and have some text or some context within our page. So at the same time, this then becomes how we work with our tags. We can't only just work with tags, we can also work with CSS as well. So we want to get into some CSS and show how CSS works for developing our page. So a page itself will contain more than one aspect of each element that we're working with, and with those aspects we can then be able to build and design and develop something that is more user-friendly, and we can be able to achieve more based on whatever it is that we want to do. So the next thing we want to do now is we want to get into CSS, which is the next bit. We can put CSS in our HTML because it still applies, but let's just do a bit of the basics for our CSS, whereby we can save this file as in our CSS folder. We can then call it page, and then for the type we need to make it CSS. We click on save, and then now we can do whatever it is that we want to do with our CSS. So our CSS now basically means outside of the tags. Our HTML works with tags. Our CSS works with classes and containers or div containers. So everything that we're working with would then be defined as classes. So for a start, I can put asterisk, I put 2 curly brackets, and then I can specify that I want a padding of 20 pixels, like that. What this then means is this becomes our code for our CSS, whereby asterisk stands for all, and then padding means we want to put space between our page. So as you can see here, there is no space between our text and our content, so that's what we want to actually fix when we are working with our CSS. So we can then put a padding to 20, so that with our padding we can be able to view changes on our page. So we then need to come back to home, and then under home we come back and we put a link like we had previously mentioned. We put an href, whereby our href we want to be able to put the content of our file. So we need css and then page.css, and then we need a type which will then make text/css, and then we need a rel which will then make into style sheet, like that. So we click on that and we save. We come back to our page. If we refresh, you then actually see that we have actually changed the look. It's not what we had previously. So our CSS, if we've implemented it well, will then give us a different look onto our page, and whilst our page has that, we can be able to modify and change certain things. So we can also come back to our CSS and maybe reduce that and say, let's have it at 10. We click on save, you come back there, and you then see we still have padding, but the space has sort of reduced. So we will be working with implementing different aspects or different attributes to our given page or our given document. So as we are actually working with this, we can build step by step, and as we are building step by step, we can then have something that is tangible, and that being tangible makes our design process a process on its own. So in general, we would need to at least understand what PHP is. We then need to understand what CSS is. We need to understand what HTML is. We also need to understand what JavaScript is, so that we can be able to use those building blocks to build whatever it is that we are intending to build at the same time. If you recall, in the previous lesson, we worked with databases. We would also need to be able to pick from a database, get some content that we would want to work with, and with that content, we can be able to build something that works, or something that will be our website and will contain different values and aspects that we can use in future or for future reference. So for this lesson, I think we can end here. We'll pick up in the next lesson as we also touch into what our CSS is, and then we'll bring all these things together as we design our program. At the same time, we also want to work with some of the design attributes that we are supposed to work with, so that we know how to design our software or our application in whichever language that we are working with. I will also add these notes, or these small reminders of how we are doing whatever we're doing, so that at least you can follow. And since we are recording this, if you've got any questions, please do ask on the video, or you can just go through whatever it is that I would have explained, so that you get a better understanding of what each element does.